And welcome in again to be our guest. We've been talking with Lee Sentell, who is the Director of Tourism and Travel for Your Sweet Home, Alabama. And he has just been telling us so many wonderful things. And we talked about all of the history. And Lee has written a book. And I absolutely love this. And I'm going to use this segment to have you tell us about your book. Tell us what prompted it, what you love the most about having done it when you finished and looked back at it. So I'm ready to learn, and so are you.
One of the most interesting things I learned when I was doing research for this book is who was responsible for starting interest in the civil rights movement in Alabama. And most people, the last person they would guess is George Wallace.
True.
Shortly before the runoff between George Wallace and Ryan de Graffenried, a senator from Tuscaloosa, in I think it was 1982, Governor Wallace was running behind. And one Sunday morning, he showed up at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. The state trooper helped get his wheelchair out. Governor Wallace rolled himself down the aisle to the front of the church. Unexpected, uninvited.
Wow.
Nobody knew that he was coming.
Wow.
And somebody handed him a microphone, and he said, "I want to apologize to you and your people." He said, "I have not treated your people fairly during my time in office, and I want to apologize for that, and I want to ask for your forgiveness and ask for your vote." If there's one thing I've learned while living in Montgomery, African Americans are the most forgiving people, particularly in things that are involving religion.
Right.
And so that word spread rapidly. And so the next week or whenever the election was, African Americans in large numbers voted for George Wallace. And he was elected. And the person who was picked as his tourism director was Ed Hall from Birmingham, who George Wallace didn't know. But Ed knew people in Birmingham that were connected to George Wallace. Ed was the number 2 person at Birmingham Tourism, and he wanted to be state tourism director. So he got those people to contact Governor Wallace. And these people said, "We know him, we've worked with him at the Birmingham Convention and Visitors Bureau, and we think he'll do a great job." Well, after about 6 months, so Governor Wallace appointed him. And after about 6 months, Ed got up the nerve to make an appointment to go see Governor Wallace. And he said, "Governor, you owe your election to African Americans." And he said, "That's right, I do." And Ed said, "Well, let's do something to pay tribute to that demographic." And Ed said, "I want to create a Black Heritage Guide that will lift up the churches and other locations that are part of their religion." And so Governor Wallace agreed to do that. And so over about the next year, they collected a lot of photos of Black churches and Black leaders. And when Alabama created the nation's first Black Heritage Guide, the fact that it was coming from Alabama, it made the front page of the Los Angeles Times.
Wow.
There was a story at the bottom on a Sunday about what Alabama had done. And that started changing people's impressions of the state of Alabama. And so that book, I don't know what to say it evolved, but over time, every couple of years, there would be more churches or more landmarks put in that. So I was aware of it because at this time, I was at Space and Rocket Center, and I was very aware of that publication. And so when I got this job 20 years ago, I looked at it and I thought, this is a great history piece, but it's not enough about tourism. And after all, that's our job, is to get more people to come and see these places. And so I went through the Black Heritage Guide and pulled out the museums and tourist attractions and all that people were coming to see on a regular basis, and put together a brochure called the Alabama Black Heritage Guide, no, the Alabama Civil Rights Trail. That's what it was. And so for about the first 10 years, we did that. We did some minor advertising, and people at the welcome centers would be surprised to see that in Alabama.
Right.
And then other states that are in this organization called Travel South USA, they were noticing that we were getting attention, and that tour groups who were coming to Alabama to tour our black churches and other black landmarks were saying, well, now we're going to Alabama, or we've been to Alabama, now where are your black landmarks? And other states were not marketing them in the way we were. And so other states started saying, help us do that. Help us start our own civil rights trail. And so in 2017, as a group, I said, okay, let's see what landmarks that you have in your states that are comparable to Alabama's landmarks. And so we all came together and had a total of about 120 sites across the Deep South. And we called that the U.S. Civil Rights Trail. And I was just talking with Rosemary Judkins,
right,
who many of you know.
Mm-hmm.
She just got back from Germany yesterday, and she was talking about all the great response that she had gotten from people who over the past years, they couldn't get much attention, and they couldn't get people interested in Alabama. But now, because we've had more visibility for the Civil Rights Trail, people are coming to Alabama in big numbers, particularly with the opening of the Equal Justice Initiative.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, what people don't realize is that the first year that was open, 400,000 people came to see EJI in Montgomery.
Right.
The first year it was open.
Right.
The next year, there were 500,000 people. I mean, that was number 2 only behind the Space and Rocket Center as far as tourist attractions in the state. And so so I decided that our website of the Civil Rights Trail needed to be more than a website. So it was actually the idea of Dr. Bernice King, Dr. King's daughter, because she came over and did an event with us, and she said, you've got a nice website. I visited, looked at it today, but you need a book. And so I told our ad agency, okay, let's transfer the Civil Rights Trail website into a book. And then I realized when they did that, there was not a lot of context explaining why stuff happened in Alabama. Maybe they knew that a lot of things had happened in Birmingham in 1963 and Selma in 1965, but they weren't quite sure why. And so, sort of drawing on my old newspaper experience, then I tried to make a short news story about each of the 14 cities that we profiled in this book. And it started, the book starts in Topeka, Kansas, with Brown versus Board of Education decision in 1954, and it winds up in Atlanta with the burial of Dr. King. So it was a good experience to do, and I learned a lot, even things that I thought I already knew.
I recommend this highly. Please, you can get it on Amazon too, but it is wonderful, and what I love is it is true. It is factual. It's nothing made up. This is actual history. And the truth is hard to find sometimes, and this is it. And we cannot thank you enough for writing this, for giving us the opportunity to learn what we all need to learn. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll be right back.